Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stormkeep. Today I'm joined by...
It's Daniel.
Hey, Night in podcast from Grande here.
And Jack.
Today we are going to be looking at Season 1 list building. This is an ongoing series we have called the Lords of the Storm, which is a little narrative hook that we like to put in on this channel. The Lords of the Storm are the ruling chamber command of each storm host. So the storm hosts are broken down into chambers, and each chamber has specific command structure. So you'll see units like the Celestins, Imperitants, Castellans, Relictors, Heraldors, all the various knights that help make decisions on what the strategy for the battle will be. So why are we talking about lists again? Well, we like talking about lists, for starters, and Season 1 has introduced some really huge changes to the game. Now, the major change is that there's a new unit type, which we call Infantry, and it is any unit that's battle line, it has 1 to 4 wounds, and it's unmounted. And all units with this type of stats gain the Veteran keyword, the Galatian Veteran keyword, and every turn, every round, the player going second picks an objective, and that objective becomes the Proving Ground. And only units with the Veteran keyword can contest that Proving Ground, which is a huge deal. So you want to bring some veterans to your list. The other thing is that veteran units can fight in 2 ranks, effectively. If you're within half an inch of a model that's within half an inch of an enemy, then you get to fight even if you don't have the correct weapon range. So this allows units like Vanquishers, Liberators to fight in 2 ranks when previously they couldn't, and that was a big downside. Now, to counteract this big focus on these types of units, Games Workshop has also decided to add a very exciting new battalion called the Bounty Hunters, which is 2 to 3 of any troop unit. So this is any wound characteristic, can be mounted, unmounted, as long as it is a troop, which means not monster, not artillery, and not a leader. But every other unit in the game qualifies. And the benefit from this battalion is that in melee, you deal +1 damage to veteran units with all of your attacks. And that's a crazy high damage. Depending on the unit. Some units scale very well with it, others not so much. If you're interested in the numbers behind the scenes, you can take a look at our previous video where we did unit comparisons with the Hunter bonus and without. And that helps inform a lot of our decision making when we go to make lists. There's also a new realm spell called the Gaze of Ghur. It casts on a 7, it has a 12-inch range, but it halves the number of models that the enemy unit counts as. So if you hit a Gargant with it, instead of counting for 20 models, they count for 10. If you hit a unit of 30 witches, they'll count as 15, and then every loss also reduces that by another one. And that lasts, for the rest of the game. It never stops, and it stacks. So if you hit a Gargant with it twice, it's now only counting as 5 models, which is a big deal. There's a new realm command ability, and we're not going to talk about it. There's new battle plans, new battle tactics. There's all kinds of new stuff that informs how we approach the battle with Stormcast. There was also a battle scroll update. I'm sure everybody knows about it, but just in case people are coming into this late, Thunderbolt Volley can only be used by non-reinforced units, which has really impacted how we build our list. And the Stormdrake ability, Draconic Onslaught, only allows the unit to reroll charge rolls rather than allowing them to move in the hero phase. So a completely different use of this unit now. It's been definitely nerfed. You can't say it's not a nerf, but it's allowed us to view the unit more favorably compared to other Stormcast units. And then now, instead of being this completely different unit that is just way faster and super durable, now it's just kind of like a faster flying Dracoth that does less damage in exchange for more durability. So kind of a cool unit, actually, to play with. And there's new stuff in the metagame. Tournaments are seeing a lot of Nighthaunt at Sylvaneth. They're a very big threat, and you have to account for them in your list building. I think Nighthaunt in particular are so prevalent and so popular that you got to have some way to deal with those 4-up Ethereal followed by a 5-up board. It's really, you got to think about it. Otherwise, you're not going to do well at tournaments. And Sylvaneth are this very interesting mix of mobility and defense, which we haven't seen in an army before. Stormcast are kind of in that way, but we're not nearly as mobile, but in exchange we do a lot more damage, especially shooting. So Sylvaneth are a very different army to Stormcast, and they're really fun to play against. It's a very unique style.
All right, so this is the latest iteration of a list that has been in the making for exactly a year now, about a year? A little more than a year. Well, half a year, sorry. And the core stays the same. The main switch is the third Annihilator unit is no longer there, simply because we need something to be able to hit Identity Deepkin on High Tide, and having 600 to 700 points in the sky, it's a bit of a difficult play against some of the lists that are just faster now and just can be in your face with deep strikes or something, Tourmaline.
Well, hold on.
So
before we get too deep into this specific version of it, for people who have never seen this list, what is the Annihiliana Grande and what is it trying to do?
So the main concept of this list revolves around an Imperatant, 2 to 3 units of Annihilators dropping 7 inches away, so 1 each turn. And then a backline, like a sniper's nest of Vanguard Raptors, or any long-range shooter that you prefer. You could use Judicators, but I personally prefer Raptors here. And the idea is you're essentially just sniping things from long range, taking out key things that your opponent has, and then you're dropping these hand grenades on them from the sky, like ODST, Halo, Shock Troopers, and just like taking out whatever's necessary. And based on that concept of the list, this list used to have 3 Annihilator groups in it, but now it has been shortened to 2 because of High Tide and a bunch of meta changes that we have to account for. The Knight Judicator was in this list, but he has been replaced by the Knight Incantor, and that's mainly because endless spells are coming back in a big, big way, and being able to deny a key endless spell can often be the difference between losing or winning. The changes to this list are, obviously, we split up the Vanguard Raptors, because with the Aether Wings, we still can maintain some efficiency, and Thunderbolt Volley is always a great thing to have, especially for this list, because you want to be able to use it in certain times to clear out screens to make space for your Annihilators to land 7 inches away and just hit a bunch of things. And the 2 changes that are ones from this edition mainly are the 5 Vanquishers, which took the spot of, you could say, the 3rd Annihilator or in the Liberator in a sense. Like, they can be a screen when you want them to, but against matches like Nighthaunt, you can also drop these guys. Since they're in the Bounty Hunter Battalion, they're going to be getting those like sweet 20 attacks on, 2s and 3s, -1, 2 damage, and that's amazing. Stormgrave Guard are the latest addition to this list. These I was actually very, very impressed with. Unlike other Stormgrave Guard lists where they act more as hammers, where they go out and seek targets and kill them, initially in this list, they act as an anvil. They're extremely tough, 18 wounds on a 3-up save. It's not very easy to get through these guys. They sort of protect your castle turns 1 and 2, and then they sort of reach out and start hitting stuff in the midfield with mortal wounds and charges and start taking stuff out. Monstrous actions are always amazing to have. And one of the weaknesses of this list is it kind of struggles against Absorbing Unleash Hell. Stormgrave Guard can do that job for you. They reach out 12 inches out in the mid-board, and if there's something that you're afraid of, they can unleash Hell, like a turtle or something. Well, charge your Stormgrave Guard in and use Draconic Onslaught to make sure their charge goes through with a reroll. Warlord Battalion, obviously, because we wanted an enhancement. We used to go for an extra artifact, Mirror Shield, but I don't think that's really important anymore. If they're really hitting your heroes, you're probably already winning that game anyway, or losing that game, depending on how it's going. So we went for the Holy Command for Steadfast March. I actually took this list to ATC. I made some changes, and one of the things was I reduced my drops from 10 to 8 by taking the Redemption Brotherhood Battalion from the Stormcast book. And it did come in handy in a couple of matchups because a lot of people are going that Warlord, Expert Conquerors, Bounty Hunters route, and it's causing them to have approximately 8 or 9 drops. So if you get the drop on them by being attacker, you can actually dictate turn priority too, which is pretty sweet. So what I did was I think I put my Raptors and Aether Wings in there. I think I put my Raptors and Aether Wings in there. And in ATC in particular, I switched out Steadfast March for Call for Aid. And the reason I did that is because with this, I was like, when I look at this list and I think of things I want to Steadfast March, it's mostly the Stormgrave Guard. But when I do that, they won't be able to shoot, which is a large part of where their damage comes from, if I ever end up doing that. So I was a bit apprehensive on that, so I wanted to be more conservative in using them. And so I switched it after Call for Aid, because then it makes my Vanquishers a throwaway unit. They can be screens that can die, and then they can come back for free with my Imperitance free command point. Or if I send them out to fight, they can kill something. If my opponent doesn't deal with it, they can keep killing, or they die and they come back again. It actually made it a big difference in my games, especially when it comes to taking objectives late game, because they would wipe it out and I would just replace it with a Lord Relictor on the other side of the board on another objective, Holy Within 12. The last addition to this list is a Horrorghast. Horrorghast, because since this thing plays like a sniper, you can deploy Horrorghast from really far away and has a really high effective range, something like Holy Within 32 inches. And against an Iron Jaws player this past weekend, I actually completely wrecked him. I think I made something like 8 brutes run away, and I completely demolished 2 blocks of 6 pigs because of this spell. So yeah, it's really good against some of the armies that matter.
Yeah, issuing 3 commands with the with the mega boss is really good, but when you can't issue the command, it's not so good.
Yeah, and like I said, they have such low bravery that the fact that this thing makes D3 additional models flee, like, oh, they have no chance. And I often like honestly like this list, I'm very nervous about facing Beasts of Chaos, especially when they start spamming things like Bulgors and Dragon Ogres because they're just so freaking cheap. They're just like masses on masses of wounds. But if I have this spell in my pocket and I can deploy it against them, that makes that matchup a lot bearable because you kill 3 models and they will run away because the additional D3 models then Horghast like I guess like makes them run away with it is not affected apparently by their terrain piece because the terrain piece only says if any models flee from battle shock. If any additional D3 models flee, that's the Horghast doing it. So they will basically lose whatever 6 block they're running.
Yeah,
if they ever fail a battle shock.
It's not the battle shock result that's causing D3 to flee, it's the Horghast itself. You're right.
Yeah. So if you kill like 3 to 4 models, which you can in any one of their 6 block units, so like Dragon Ogres or Bulgors, you will make that unit run away. Which is extremely helpful in that matchup because Annihiliana Grande struggles with chewing through lots and lots of wounds. And with the zombies, obviously, like this obviously murders Soulbite Gravelord zombie lists. If they're spamming 40, 60 zombies at you, you deploy this thing and they're toast.
Oh, yeah. Before you had to cut through a Necromancer who was going to try to pass off wounds constantly, and you had to dedicate a lot of resources for... You basically spend a turn killing the Necromancer that's bodyguarding them, and then you actually get to chunk it through them. But Horghast just skips that process entirely. You can start cutting through zombie squads on turn 1.
Mm-hmm. Now, weaknesses-wise, I can see this list struggling against Caradron Overlord 1-drops. The ones that like try to deploy a Vortex in your face and just try to shoot the crap out of you, or like deploy a Purple Sun in your face and do the same. Those I can see this list struggling with because it's just you just can't afford to be 1-drop. Like it's tough. It's doable, but it's tough.
Well, it's interesting you say that because here we have a picture of you playing against Caradron Overlords. With your dragons up front, I'm assuming, to get the 4-up spell ignore and deny space.
Yep. So funny story. This person was not a 1-drop because he went for 2 Ironclads. So he decided to go for the extra artifact anyway. And I think he was the same drops as me. But I dropped first being the attacker. So over here I deploy my Relictor, my Vanquishers, and my Imperatant and Incanters on the right side. Everything that I need protecting is in the forest because he can't see them if he tries to shoot them, even after a teleport. I deploy my dragons out front because if he wants to shoot him, he can. Like, it's fine. I'll just all-out defense them. I took turn 1, and you don't see it, but just past like the top dragon in that piece of terrain are 3 other raptors. And I deploy them like that. So when I get first turn, I took the first turn, which I normally don't do. Now, this guy had 2 main heroes that I needed to take out. One was the Chemist on the left Ironclad, and you don't see it because it's dead. This guy had the bottle with the Warp Lightning Vortex. In the top right was the Navigator with something called a Gale Force Stave, which was apparently an anti-Stormcast pick. It picks a unit within 12 at the start of the charge phase and halves the charge roll. So Annihilators will basically never complete a charge as long as that thing is alive. So turn 1, I translocate the Aether Wings up. I Thunderbolt Volley, his Chemist is dead. And with his Chemist dead, the Warp Lightning Vortex is no longer a threat in that list. I basically rolled hot. I think I rolled 4 mortal wounds, and then I basically all of them hit and all of them wound, and he couldn't save them all, even after the Garrison Rule effect. So that was pretty sweet. And then I was able to take out his Ironclad on the left with a volley from the Raptors, which did something like 8 mortal wounds. The Annihilators dropped, did 3 mortal wounds. They charged and rolled exactly 7 mortal wounds on a 10. So that basically deleted him before he could do any Unleash Hell shenanigans with it. And then, yeah, his other Ironclad had to come close to try and kill the dragons. He failed, so in my turn, I got priority, and I essentially killed his Gale Force staff with Dragon Breath. As you can see, my opponent also has a Krondspine. It's kind of in the back. It's because my Annihilators landed in the back and killed the boat. His Krondspine was deployed way far up. I guess he just wanted to push it into my lines as soon as possible, but he actually took them back to deal with the Annihilators. Which that surprised me because I felt like that was the wrong play because Annihilators really weren't going anywhere once they were there. But hey, if he wanted to do that, that's fine. And yeah, after that, his Annihilator went wild and was actually crashed into his own Ironclad, the second one that you see in the picture here. He chose to target all the attacks on his main general, and his general died. And then I was able to translocate the dragons out before the Krondspine could level. And yeah, the game was basically over because I had my Relictor alive, I had most of the objectives on the board, and he didn't have anything.
Nice. Well, let me ask you a question here, because we could have included Storm Drakes for the past 12 months. We could have been using them in this list. And I think the reason we didn't, primarily, because they would have been great for battle tactics. They still roar. They had the hero phase move previously. And I think the reason we didn't do it is because this is not a list that's going to have an overwhelming victory and just table the opponent turn 1. It's trying to have like surgical precision strikes and play a 5-round game. And when you're giving up a point per turn because of Storm Drakes, that can just lose you the game right there. Do you think that sound about right?
That sounds extremely right, because even now, my score, like this is not a list that is like trying to pin and win, because that seems to be the strategy for across the majority of lists in Age of Sigmar right now. Not let your opponent score while you score. This list sort of just is on like you on the first 2 rounds, you're at parity with your opponent in terms of scoring. It's turn 3 where you start to turn the tide around, and then you win by like 10 points or 8 points. It's not going for blowout victories. So yeah, so this is a slower list. So the Storm Drake Guard, like honestly, we could have put them there, and they would probably have been better with old Draconic Onslaught. But it's fine. Like it's like, since we're playing a castle, like a very conservative castle, the concepts still work.
Right
on that, having played this list a lot as well, that Storm Drake Guard slot is kind of like the pinning slot for this list. And you can run alternate units in there. Popular one is to go ahead and run 2 chariots, because it gives you around the same points cost, as well as giving you, more, somewhat more options to go out and, get things done on the objectives. You want a unit that can go out and be quick. Like with any castle, like with Hallowstrike, you have the Fulminators there to go and be a faster unit, something that can break through the castle. The dragons serve that. Chariots can serve that. I've run this list with an Incarnate before as well, as a good anchor piece. There's a lot of ways you can build this list. Really neat, but in the end, this list is more about decisions than some of the other lists and knowing your opponent army. So you have to know when to commit where, when to drop your Annihilators, how to drop them. It takes a lot of practice, but it's super rewarding. I'm very happy to play this list, and I think it's one of our best lists, honestly.
Yeah, the only change I've been debating really is to maybe try out the Incarnate instead of the Dragon. And that's it. And I think it's because this list plays that conservative role, there are things that can kill dragons, with the Incarnate will at least live for 2 turns, is making me consider it. But honestly, I really like the dragons because they just provide that extra bit of mortal wounds in shooting that, I think this list sometimes really needs.
And they can issue holy commands. Let's not forget that.
Yes. Very important. Especially if you're translocating raptors, and then issuing commands, the Draconid can definitely issue holy commands.
That, and my past 2 tournaments with them, with the new book, I have used the book tactics in every single one of my games at least once.
Yeah, Draconid Destruction. Yeah. Yep.
So they're really good for that reason. That's why I wasn't running the Incarnate, because that was where I ended up last season. That was the list I was running, was an Incarnate Annihiliana Grande list, and I went back to Dragons because, well, for one, the hunt, of course, and also those book tactics really do matter a lot.
Next up is a new archetype called the Catboat, which is an Astral Templars list, although I could just kind of pick the Astral Templars arbitrarily. The core of the list is using Celestial Dracolines, which were previously a unit we would just never use because they were too expensive and not very impactful. But with the new endless spell Lauchon the Soulseeker, it allows any unit with the Wizard keyword, which Dracolines have as long as they have 2 or more models, it allows them to use Lauchon to teleport 18 inches in the hero phase, which gives them an unparalleled amount of mobility, because unlike every other teleport in the game, Lauchon the Soulseeker lets you move normally. It specifically says you can move normally. It's not even a case where they forgot to put that in there. It says you can do it. So, it's redundant, but it's good because that means there's no arguing about it with your opponent, which is the best.
It's like they're the new dragons.
Pretty much. Yeah, so you cast the Lauchon the Soulseeker, and you teleport your Vindicators 18 inches, and then they move 12 inches, and then they have a rerollable charge. That's an incredible threat range. That allows you pretty much to strike anywhere with a 3-inch charge very reliably. Even if your opponent redeploys, you're still going to get a very good charge. Worst case scenario, you're looking at a 9 with a reroll, which is still doable, right? Like 9-inch charges happen; they're not impossible, and that is after a 6 redeploy. So,
And you've got a battle mage too.
and you've got a battle mage, so if you really want to guarantee it, you can get +2 to your charge rolls, and that becomes a 7-inch rerollable. So, rounding out the list, I figured another unit of Dracolians just to make sure you could do this more than once per game, because that's what it's kind of the whole game plan here. So we might as well go all in on it. I rounded it out with some shooting from Longstrike Raptors. They have a very long range, and Thunderbolt Volley on them allows them to double up their efficiency on the first turn. Very impactful opening salvo. Followed by Lord Relictor to translocate them to get line of sight. I got 10 Judicators with crossbows that can drop in and deal really good damage for their cost, and some min-sized squads of Liberators. As the general for this list, the one you see on screen, I picked the Lord Arcanum on Celestial Dracolian just because I wanted to see what possible use we could actually have for this hero, because his aura gives the Dracolians +1 to attacks with their mounts, and I thought that's an interesting unit steroid. We don't have a lot of buffs like that just give us more damage. It's usually +1 hit, maybe +1 to wound. We have accuracy, not damage increases. So I thought that might be an interesting tech, but I think the Lord Arcanum on Griff Charger could be. You can just swap out the Dracolian for the Griff Charger very easily in this list, and it performs very, very similar. And then for other endless spells, I decided the Cogs were an interesting pick because they allow all wizards with wholly within 12 to reroll spells, and there's 3 hero wizards and then 2 unit wizards, so that's 5 spells per turn that you're rerolling, which is cool. And the Purple Son of Shaiish to give all of your stuff extra rend. Judicators love the extra rend. Dracolians love the extra rend. It allows you to not just kill veteran units with those bounty hunter Dracolians, but also punch some big monsters, because with -1 save, your Evocators are suddenly an armor-killing machine. Here's a look at a typical deployment. Deployment is such a weird thing in this game. It's always going to depend on the battle plan. It's always going to depend on your opponents. It's going to depend on what you're trying to do. But this is kind of just an idea to look at the amount of space this list takes up on the table, what you're looking at in terms of screening, disposable units, things like that. So the goal here is you start your Dracolians in a position that probably both of them can use the boat, Lauchon, I should say. So the way I've positioned those Dracolians looks a little strange when Lauchon isn't there, but when you put him on the table, it's very obvious that's why they're there, because the unit has to be wholly within 3 inches. So all 3 of the wizards are able to cast the Cogs in that spot that it's located there, and that will give all the wizard units in this list rerollable casts. The Lord Arcanum on Dracoline and the Battle Mage are in range to cast Lauchon there, so either one of them can put Lauchon down, and the Lord Relictor is on the other side. He can cast the Lauchon for the unit of Dracolians on the right. The crossbow Judicators are in reserve, and it's a standard castle formation. You play defensively because you have such long threat ranges. You can play pretty far back. So if you wanted to, you can even push back further towards the back of the board there. Have you guys tried out this archetype yet? Have you had a chance to play with the Dracolians?
I haven't, and I really want to. I really want to try this out because it looks really cool. Going back to the previous list, I think it's cool that it has a multiple ways of getting in as well. Like if you really wanted to, you could go all out and still do Battle Mage with the Relictor and get the second unit in if you wanted to multi-charge, if you're in a situation where you're not worried about them hitting you back that second unit. Along with, of course, the crossbows. There's a lot of alpha potential here if the opponent gives you that opportunity, but it can also sit back and hold on to them almost like Annihilators, right? You're sending them in, sending in that package to do a lot of damage, especially to GVs. Just a really cool list that has a lot of tools, which I enjoy a lot.
Yeah, that was definitely my takeaway from this build, is that it's going to play very similarly to the Annihilators list. The Raptor Thunderbolt Volley lets you target and take out a screen in the hero phase, and then use the boats with that reduced area denial to get the guys closer. The Relictor can then translocate either the other unit of cats in or the hero to give the aura for the +1 attack. Like, it's a very mobile list.
And Purple Sun, even, if you want to go for it.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's why I like the Griff Charger as a potential swap here, because the Griff Charger can just teleport back after casting a Purple Sun. Now, an 8+ rerollable is not reliable enough to make that tactic work generally, but because the Griff Charger can just teleport back to safety, there's almost no risk involved if you fail to cast.
Mm-hmm.
The crossbows here, you can maybe swap them out for some long strikes, because long threat ranges and Dracolians go really well together. Now, I am concerned then with the lack of bodies and the lack of veteran units, so I think that's kind of what makes this list a little bit different than one of our other archetypes, the Longest Strike, which you could just use Dracolines in with Lauchon. But I think the crossbows kind of make this a more mid-range focused castle, and then the Dracolines have the potential to go where you need them to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's also worth noting that this Lauchon is also like a pseudo fly, so you can just pull your Dracolines out of whatever situation they're in, and then just use Lauchon to jump over enemy units. So this isn't just like for alpha striking. This is also mid-game relocation. So it's something to keep in mind. The Relictor being able to translocate himself wherever you need and then cast Lauchon wherever you need is a really good combo and shouldn't be underestimated, because your Dracolines can just dip out of combat anytime they want and go find another enemy to fight, which is very, very useful.
Yeah, lots of tools and lots of unbinds. Good stuff.
There's only one that's rerollable, but there's a lot. What's cool about Dracolines is that they don't really, like, if you dispel an enemy spell in the enemy's turn or in your turn, that's fine. Like, you're not that worried about them losing their cast. Like, it's nice to empower themselves, but it's not necessary at all. So it feels good to dispel. Normally when you're trying to dispel something in Stormcast, it's like, I got to give up my prayer or a spell or something, and that really sucks. But with Dracolines, it's okay. It's not a big deal. One last thing I wanted to mention for the Storm hosts here, you can just take this list and swap it to Celestial Vindicators. I think we went Astral Templars because if you're not taking any particular battle line choice, if you're not taking Gardas, then both of those Storm hosts are a viable pick. Celestial Vindicators giving you a little bit more damage output is actually pretty decent on a list like this, where you want your Dracolines to be as impactful as possible. Since they don't fight well when reinforced, they take up too much space and they have to use that weird like flower pattern thing, which I hate doing. So pumping up min-sized squads actually has a lot of value, so Celestial Vindicators is a good pick. But Astral Templars is also good. We're seeing a lot of tree lords that are forcing you to fight last and then hitting you and making you not pile in, which is an obnoxious combo. We're seeing a lot of Mock Crusher Stomp still, which can actually just do tremendous damage to this kind of elite force. So Astral Templars is definitely a good pick as well. However, this next list, you have to play Astral Templars, really, to understand what this list is trying to do. So this is called the Dauntless Hunters, which is named after one of the old Astral Templar abilities from 2nd edition that allowed them to have a pre-game move. And the main concept of this list is to run Annihilators that are immune to monstrous rampages. Because, as I'm sure Magonk explained so eloquently when talking about Annihiliana Grande, one of the weaknesses of Grand Hammers with Annihilators, first off, they have to make their charge roll, which is a big enough weakness. But then after they make their charge roll, they also have to contend with monstrous actions, which can be really brutal. There's a lot of monsters in the metagame right now with like Magmadroth spam for Fire Slayers and Tree Lords and Stormcast Dragons. There's a lot of monsters you're worried about, and just a stomp can take out a third of your damage output. If you get unlucky, they can hit you with all kinds of nasty stuff. Roar is really nasty as well to stop you from getting +1 hit, and then let's say they have like a -1 wound effect as well. Like, you really don't want to be dealing with these things. So the concept here is Grand Hammers that are immune to monstrous rampages. And when you go down that route, what you find is, well, you still need a Lord Imperator, obviously, and Vanguard Raptors with Longstrike crossbows are still excellent with Grand Hammers, but you need to fill your battle line somehow. And what we found was that Vanguard Hunters are actually really, really useful in this kind of archetype because of their ability to just teleport anywhere. You won't necessarily have to run a Lord Relictor, so you can shave those points and bring some more utility-focused heroes instead of a Lord Relictor, pretty much a one-trick pony, just translocating a unit every turn. You can bring in stuff like the Rune Lord, which is a very interesting ally. He gets +2 to Unbind, and he can unbind 2 spells per turn if you use the heroic action. And Dispel at +2. If you stick him on some arcane terrain, then he's at +3, which is really, really good. And to round it out, we added a unit of Liberators, along with the Hunters and Expert Conquerors, and some more speed and the ability to absorb Unleash Hell with Prosecutors and Celestial Hammers. I think we've definitely talked about Prosecutors with Twin Hammers on this channel, and they're good. I actually really like them in Bounty Hunters. They're not a priority target for your opponent. So turn after turn, they're just whittling away units of of skeletons, dire wolves, sometimes sentinels, and a lumineth army. Like whatever you need to fight, they're just chipping away at it. And if your opponent dedicates any resources into it, you feel great because, I mean, look at this list. There's nothing in this list that your opponent can put their big damage into, right? Like everybody's running these big damage units, and there's nothing in this list that needs that big damage. So everything whatever your opponent decides to fight in this army or shoot at is a mistake. Everything is easy to kill. Nothing is survivable. Everything's disposable.
Yeah, very similar to an Annihiliana list, of course, in that respect. You're looking at something that's a little less almost interactive with your opponent. Than some other list where you have, if you have Fulminators on the ground, you have Dracots on the ground, it's something they can target, something they can take out. Like Paul was saying, they're all disposable. They hit your Raptors and they shoot them. They can only shoot one unit with something bigger usually. They don't usually have multiple threats to get into something like that. The Annihilators are of course in the sky, the Prosecutors are going to be in the sky, the Vanguard Hunters are going to be able to teleport around. In a lot of the battle plans, you can still get onto the objectives from that board edge teleport, which is very cool. It's just a really neat list. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to try this one out. I got to buy some Vanguard Hunters.
It's definitely not like it's not a take all comers kind of list. It's like a variant of Annihiliana Grande that's specifically trying to improve the weakness that it has facing monster lists. Like charging into Storm Drakes is awful with Annihiliana Grande, but with this list you get the Prosecutors to absorb the Unleash Hell, and the Grand Hammers are immune to the Stomp that comes after that, and then the Roar if there's another unit of Drakes, for example.
Yeah. One thing we didn't quite go over was the Knight Azuros in the list, which is super neat because he can go ahead and deep strike in behind the Annihilators, get behind their charge, give them the bonus to hit, which they'd be missing if they're using the Holy Command we took here, Unleash Thy Hatred.
The only way he'd get the +1 hit off is if he actually charges into combat, because his ability is specifically 9 inches.
Oh, it is 9 inches. I thought it was 12.
Within 9 inches.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he's so fast that you can generally just run, like this list almost doesn't use command points because the Aether Wings give you +1 hit, the Imperaton is there, so you can run 6 with the Azuros, and that's an 18-inch range, and then 9 inches from him gives him the +1 hit on the Lantern. And then I interrupted your thought there, but I think where you're going with is that he can issue Unleash Thy Hatred on the Grand Hammers, which can give them that extra little bit of damage they need to, instead of barely missing a kill on a Bastiladon, it secures the kill because that's an extra 3 attacks that go in that do 3 damage apiece. So if you miss or you low roll, or if you're just fighting something that's really durable, then it's the extra little bit of insurance that you need.
Yeah, that, and if you're fighting almost anything with multiple models, the Annihilators are getting a +1 hit anyway. So,
well, not in this list.
Oh wait, actually no, they're not in this list. Yeah, never mind. Dang it! Every single one of my ideas. Oh well.
Well, yeah, it's really easy to forget that that's not a Grand Hammer ability. That's the Knight's Excelsior ability.
Right. Just so used to it.
So here's the kind of typical loadout you'll see in this picture. I've proxied 5 Liberators for Vanguard Hunters on the left, and I'm also using a proxy for the Rune Lord because I'm not going to go out and buy a new Rune Lord until they put out the new battle tome for Cities of Sigmar. So I'm just going to use that as an acceptable proxy there. But you can see there's Vanguard Raptors in the middle, Aether Wings on both sides, Vanguard Hunters on both sides. Central, you've got your heroes located pretty well. I've decided here to put the Lord Imperator on the table because I am thinking about casting some spells with him this turn, but he can also go in reserve and then drop the Grand Hammers in immediately afterwards, 7 inches away. So that's fine to leave him off the table if you don't need him. And you can see it's a very defensive, cagey style, just like an Annihiliana Grande, but it just has different advantages, and it focuses on like everything's disposable. Like whatever your opponent hits, great. Doesn't matter. You're still got enough threats on the board. You've got 4 different threats, like main threats between the Long Strikes and the Grand Hammers, and then you've got minor threats in the objective control from the Liberators and the Vanguard Hunters. And then Prosecutors can whittle away opponents as well. So, yep, it's a really fun play style, and I think you guys should give it a try. Especially if you're a tournament player, this can really help against certain matchups. If you're finding Grand Hammers are just not getting the damage they need against Storm Drakes or against Tree Lords, this can really help you out. Or Thankful, for example.
Yeah, that's a popular combo right now we've been seeing. I really like the Vanguard Hunters being something that can teleport. If you've been playing against Sylvaneth at all recently, playing against the Tree Revenants is interesting because you're like, wow, they're there. It's like you're used to battle line units being slow and kind of stuck in places, and then suddenly they're gone, and they're taking objectives, stuff that you just left. So the Vanguard Hunter is doing that as well as doing a little bit of chip damage. It's not the most amazing shooting in the world, but it is damage, and it can matter. So really cool list. That's awesome.
Next up is our first battle regiment list, the Golden Dragons. So the concept with this list was we wanted to run the combination of Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows along with Dracoths. And that's not a combination we typically use. You have to wonder why, because they're both like the most insane damage output in the Stormcast army, so why wouldn't you put these two together? And the reason for it is that they're slow. Dracoths are only 10-inch move, even with Steadfast March and Wild Form, they're still a fixed threat range. And Judicators are also 18 inches. So this is kind of like a medium threat range army that wants to sit in the middle of the board and take really, really efficient fights, but it doesn't necessarily control which fights it takes, which is a problem. And the Battle Regiment is actually a really interesting choice to usually force your opponent to go first. Previously, that wasn't a big deal in the previous season of the game, but now everybody's going 3-drop or 5-drop or 7+. Not many people are going battle regiments. There's way less armies. So even if it's just a coin flip to go first, I think that's still an improvement over taking a bounty hunter battalion in this list. For example, fulminators don't need it. Tempesters, it's nice to have bounty hunters, but it's not like they're bad without it. So you don't need any of that fancy stuff. This is just trying to be like a condensed, streamlined list. So this runs a big block of 4 fulminators. You're going to double cast Celestial Blades and Mystic Shield on them with a Ventus. The Lord Relictor and Battle Mage can teleport them and use Wild Form in order to try to get some 7-inch charges if you need to. It's got 10 Judicators that can start off the table and then drop into play because Ventus will be giving multiple units +1 hit, but you can still always just use all-out attack. You don't have to be on the table when you're using a Taurolon necessarily. One big unit can stay off the table for sure. It runs Call for Aid with 2 units of Liberators just to give it more pressure on the board, because when you are forcing your opponent to go first, you're very likely to lose whatever screens you have set up ahead of you. People are going to charge in and wipe them out, or they're just going to shoot them down and prepare, just reduce your options. So taking Call for Aid gives you the option to just revive those units. Also took a suite of endless spells here, which I'm kind of second guessing after a few weeks after writing this list. I really like the cogs here because Aventus of rerolling spells is really good. I love having a unit of 4 fulminators with Mystic Shield and Celestial Blades. I think that's really fun. And then rerolling Thundershock is also pretty good. Geminids I'm a big fan of. They stop redeploy, they stop Unleash Hell, they stop all-out defense in the shooting phase. And when you're running, Tempesters and Judicators, that's quite a lot of damage that goes through when you deny all-out defense. Now the Horrorghast, I'm not really liking as much. I think actually you could cut the Horrorghast and you can then upgrade. You could swap out 5 Liberators for 5 more Boltstorm Judicators, or you could bring like a Chariot instead of Liberators. There's a lot of options here, and if you really want to take this list even further, I think maybe Aventus doesn't even make the cut. I think you take something cheaper and easier to use, and then you put more points in just bodies on the table. I think this kind of strategy isn't trying to be super efficient in terms of command points. I think more bodies is generally favored here. So these are just little notes, a couple weeks after we made this list, but that is the core of the list. Here's an example of a standard deployment. You can see it's a really small footprint army. It wants to stay tight together so that the Taurolon can give all units +1 hit. It doesn't have a lot of bodies, which is definitely a downside of running so many endless spells and an expensive support wizard like Aventus. The crossbow Judicators are off the table. They can drop in anywhere and just all-out attack themselves with basically no efficiency loss. And your Battle Mage, I wanted to put him in a cheeky spot to illustrate that his spell, Wild Form, requires picking a unit within 12 inches, not wholly within 12 inches. So you can see him all the way off to the side there, just barely within 12 inches of that big block of Fulminators. He's going to cast Wild Form on them out of unbinding range of the enemy army, which is going to be great because then you can translocate on a 2+ and try to get a 7-inch rerollable charge. After getting all-out defense, Mystic Shield, and Celestial Blades, that can actually be a pretty decent tar pit.
So, like, one of the things that the changes that I would make if you're dropping the Horrorghast, I think can Aventus's base fit within range of Lauchan?
I don't think so. I think he's wider than 3 inches.
Yeah, he's wider than a dragon. A dragon is 3 inches wide. Well, 2.9.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's
All
gonna be
right.
wider than a dragon.
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the changes that I think I would make would be maybe swap him for a Griff Charger and take Lauchon so that you can translocate the Fulminators that are buffed and then teleport. Oh, it doesn't matter anymore because you're not giving the +1 to hit. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Well, yeah, this is if you just want to do the most amount of damage possible, this combination of units, crossbow adjudicators, and fulminators is the way to go. Point for point, they do the most damage in our army, so that's the way to buff it. I will definitely be playing this one because I like the strategic potential of a battle regiment, kind of foregoing all the extra value that I normally enjoy taking, and just streamlining my like playing the game itself rather than just trying to optimize everything. Our first Hallowed Knights list is Hallowstrike. We've talked about this one on the channel before. It's an archetype defined around having a defensive castle play with long range shooting and Gardas Steel Soul, giving everything a 5+ ward, along with mobility options, because anytime you play a castle, you definitely want to make sure you have the movement in order to break out of that formation. That's a common problem people run into when they build a castle list. They get like 15 protectors and Andrasta and, a bunch of shooting, and it's like, great, your opponent will charge you and they're going to die, but you're not going to have the speed to get out of that formation and still be able to win the game. So you have to strike a balance, and in this list it found it with some Fulminators and a Stormstrike Chariot, in addition to having the Lord Relictor Translocation and Battle Mage combo. I think that's a really useful thing to have. So what has changed with Hallowstrike in this season? Well, Bounty Hunters exist, so let's stick some Vanquishers in that, because Vanquishers fighting on death and then getting revived with Call for Aid is a great combo, because they, as far as we can tell, they retain the Bounty Hunters battalion bonus. So when you revive them, well, you've got a pretty good hammer unit coming right back. The Expert Conquerors gives those min 5-man squads of Liberators more utility, which is great because we have to take battle line units, so we might as well squeeze out as much as we can from them. And we've actually cut down on a lot of the support heroes and things like that. We don't need monsters in this list anymore in order to get specific battle tactics, so we can run the minimum suite of heroes, which is just the Relictor, Gardas, and a Battle Mage. Everything else in this army is what you're going to use to win the game. Those 3 are just there to support them. We've broken up the squad of 6 Vanguard Raptors into 2 squads of 3. I think this offers a lot more tactical flexibility. Yeah, I mean, you have to do it if you want to use Thunderbolt Volley at all. But defensively, if your opponent tries to kill your Raptors, well, instead of killing 6, they would just kill 3. You can spread them out, and the unit of Aether Wings there can give all of them +1 hit. In terms of spells, we went with a Horror Ghast because it combos very well with the Longstrike crossbows. It turns them into Horde Killers, which previously they were not. They would cap out at, let's say, 14 damage per turn, around there, 12 to 14, something like that. And the Horror Ghast just pushes them that extra little step in order to wipe out units. So instead of, your Longstrikes killing 20 zombies and then they use Inspiring Presence and then that's it. Now they can't use Inspiring Presence, so after killing 20 zombies, 10 plus D6 run away, which is really, really efficient damage for a 40-point spell. It's not useful in all matchups. Plus D3. Yeah. Yeah. It's not good in every single matchup. Some armies just don't care. They're going to die before they Battle Shock. Some armies just have Battle Shock immunity, period. But in the matchups where it matters, the Horror Ghast really comes in handy. The other endless spell on this list are the Geminids of Ulgish, because I just like stopping all-out defense and shooting. I think that's a very useful thing to do.
Yeah, and even if Horrorghast doesn't do the most, it's so cheap. Like, I'm really liking these endless spells being able to just be slotted in for so cheap. It's very nice.
Well, and I really dig the fact that because your Raptors are broken into 2 units, it makes it more indicative to players who are learning the list to split their shots. So if you don't have hordes you have to kill on the table, you drop the Horror Ghast in range of 2 units, and then those Raptors shoot each unit, and you still get the effect out of it. In fact, you can get more because Horror Ghast is going off twice.
Yeah, potentially. That's definitely true.
Can help out.
You can also leave... Go ahead.
No, you're good.
You can also leave... You can leave 3 Vanguard Raptors on the table for Thunderbolt Volley, and then put the other 3 in reserve so that they're completely protected from any damage. These nice little bonuses from running 2 squads of 3 instead of a single squad of 6 are quite nice with the Thunderbolt change. So here's a standard deployment for Hallowstrike. You can see the ranges are meticulously measured. All units in this combination are wholly within 12 inches of Gardas, and you'll see that you can barely get on to 2 of the objectives. The third one is pretty inaccessible if you want to keep all your units in range. It's very difficult. You have to move further up, and you don't necessarily want to do that. You've got your long strikes in the back, Chariot holding a flank on the side, because with a 5-up ward, a Chariot is equivalent to having 2 Storm Drakes. It's very, very durable. It's effectively 18 wounds on a 3-up save. It's crazy. You've got your Fulminators in the middle so that they can break off left or right depending on what your opponent does. You've got Aether Wings to the weaker side where you don't have your Vanquisher screen, and I've decided to leave a unit of Liberators in reserve because this is a slow list. It needs as much mobility as possible, and the threat of 5 Conqueror Liberators coming in and just owning an objective is a big deal. Your opponents have to react to that. They have to leave units hanging back.
This is, and you'll see it when we talk about my Dracoth list. The other thing that I really like about having 2 Liberator units is if you don't need the one you deploy as a screen, or you use Call for Aid once it dies, the Relator can translocate it into the opponent's territory, and then you drop the second one in, and that's 3 victory points.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. What I really like about this kind of playstyle is it offers you the most options for scoring battle tactics. A lot of lists that we make can kind of funnel you into specific directions, and then your ability to just score whatever tactic you want when you want it is limited, and you end up making bad plays in order to score more points, which puts you further behind in the let's say the tempo aspect of the game, which is just trying to destroy your opponent and take away key pieces.
Yeah, the options in the list are really cool. One of my favorite things, I would definitely take Call for Aid as my first go-to instead of Steadfast March on this one, just because that Vanquisher unit can still basically do what it does for us in Annihiliana, because you can still Wild 4 and translocate them and have them go in and do a bunch of damage after giving them Celestial Blades. They will lift a 30 block of Reavers. I had that happen today, and it's so cool to see a little 5 block do, like 18 of their attacks pretty much go through, and they do 2 damage each. And all those saves, it's a lot to get through. And then you can just bring them back if they die, which is so cool. I love that about the list. There's the same option on the Fulminators. If you've got like Gargants to deal with, this will deal with them, even if they're not that much of a threat anymore. If you need to do something with the Chariot, you've still got before Celestial Blades wasn't as worth it on the Chariot, but with the damage bonus of Hunters, it's really good damage coming through when you get to wound on 2s. So lots of options. That's what I love about this list.
I like the Vanquishers fighting when they die here.
Yeah.
Normally against something like Nighthaunt, for instance, with the Cruciator sort of negating that Bounty Hunter damage. If you can get that extra bit of value out of them before they go out, before you call them back, Call for Aid. Yeah, I think that's a good play. It's a good addition to this list.
I wish I had the points to go, 3 squads of Vanquishers all in Bounty Hunters, because I would strongly consider that. I might consider dropping the Chariot out of Hunters and just putting the Vanquishers in there. But
I mean, yeah, because if everything's going to take increased damage, you might as well take Vanquishers and go all offense.
And Fulminators don't need Bounty Hunters like a Vanquisher does, so you could split the value across your list that way.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 block of Fulminators will just wipe out 30 ghosts if they're in Hunters. It's very satisfying.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
Real quick, did you just not have all 10 of the Vanquishers built yet? Because you saw that you can't put the command staff in the unit when you have a 5 block, right?
I know. I'm pretty sure when the new book comes out, what they're going to do is they're going to update it so that each 5-man squad can have the command, because there's no reason not to. The models can be built that way, so why not? It just
I don't know why they did that. That seems silly.
Plus, who's ever going to call me on this? Like, oh, you built the command. It's like, yeah, but I'm not using the rules. They just look cool. Of course I'm going to build the command. It's got a sweet trumpet and a banner. It looks awesome. I'm going to build it, of course. So real quick before we move off Hallowstrike, I wanted to showcase this variant that I've been testing here with 9 long strikes because I was a little sour after the Thunderbolt volley change, and I thought, you know what, if you're going to nerf my shooting, I'm just going to bring more shooting. That's all that's going to happen. Like, I'm not going to have less shooting in a list. That doesn't make any sense. So this is a version of the list that squeaks in at exactly 2,000 points, and it runs a squad of 3 Vanguard for Thunderbolt Volley, and then a squad of 6 that can drop in from play, all out attack themselves, and still deal the huge damage then. So this is more shooting than we had before, which is spiteful and mean, but that's what they've brought me to.
I absolutely adore the idea of getting 12 Raptor shots out turn 1.
Yep. In second edition, they tried nerfing Hearthguard Berserkers, and people just brought more of them. This is the same concept. Now it does come with downsides, right? You have to swap out the Vanquishers, which I really like the Vanquishers, so I don't know if that's worth it. You have to lose the Chariot, and you have to. I think you should drop the Fulminators to 2x2. That way you have more coverage on the board. This is an ongoing discussion we have a lot. Like, is it worth running 4 Fulminators, or should you just run them as 2x2? There's pros and cons to both, so it's not like one is necessarily the right answer. But when you are, if you look at the footprint of this army, you're going to have like all of it, like half your army is in shooting. So the rest of it has to spread out and take the board. So that's the reason I took 2x2 Fulminators. They can just do more stuff across the board.
So
yeah, 4 Fulminators or 2 Fulminators is a very hotly debated topic locked by the moderators after 1,000 posts. I don't know, man. Yeah, I get your point why you would want 4. It's just a huge force multiplier, and it will delete anything, and sometimes it is best to do over damage under damage. The thing is, the way AOS is moving right now, I don't know, like, we're just extremely tight. We want the correct damage to be at places. Even overcommitting sometimes really punishes us.
Yeah.
That's how I feel with my games anyway, or at GTs, so...
Yeah, you could still run the other list with just one of the Fulminators in Bounty Hunters, but you lose a little bit there, and there's variations. You don't have to play it exactly as we have it, of course.
Yeah,
I think it works well to only have 2 Fulminators here because the damage from those 12 Vanguard shots on turn 1, the 2 Fulminators will finish off whatever you need. So I think if the rest of your list can compensate for it, then 2x2 is certainly a good way to go. Gives you more control over the board, less commitment in single points. And when your opponent hits you with that big damage, you're going to lose a lot of points. Unlike Dauntless Hunters, this list can't really just throw away things. Like, you need your pieces to survive more than one turn each.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask, Paul, these Liberators in the Bounty Hunter Battalion, do they have shields, or did you want to go for more damage?
This is the only time I've ever considered using paired weapons on Liberators. And yes, I think I would. I think I would go paired weapons on them because, why not?
Why not?
I guess my real question is: do we need 2 endless spells in this one? Would it be better to?
No, you're right.
Maybe the Horrorghast could be dropped here.
I think one of the two, because you can't. I don't think because Geminid's a bit of a long range spell. Sorry, it has short range, so you need to be closer to your opponent to get it.
That's fair.
I think the endless spells could definitely be swapped. I really like playing with both of them. They both really help in certain matchups. They both really help against Nighthaunt in particular. If you're playing against 30 ghosts that are trying to 5-up ward, and you have like the Vanguard Raptor damage profile, which is like high accuracy but low damage, then having both Horrorghast and Geminids is really good. They complement each other in that particular matchup.
Okay.
But you could swap one of them out for sure. Then you can get your Liberators upgraded to Vanquishers instead, and then I guess take a Triumph maybe.
Yeah, could also go for all the Vanquishers in the Bounty Hunters, and then you could kind of make up for some of that Nighthaunt damage that you wouldn't have from the Horrorghast.
Yeah, you could do like a 3-drop or a 4-drop list with 3 Vanquisher units in Bounty Hunters, everything else in Battle Regiment.
Honestly, I see Nighthaunt going Battle Regiment more and more. They're even not even bothering.
I agree. They don't. I mean, a lot of their value that they would get out of like artifacts is just auras from their heroes. So, anyways,
yeah. I mean, all they need is really Midnight Tome. Yeah.
Next up is the Hammer and Bolter. So unlike the other Grand Hammer lists that we've talked about, which were Annihiliana, Grande, Knights Excelsior, and the Dauntless Hunters, which was in Astral Templars, Hammer and Bolter is a Hallowed Knights. list that uses Grand Hammers. And that's kind of weird because Gardas typically won't be with the Grand Hammers. Grand Hammers go deep into enemy lines and they go really far back. And if you deploy Gardas near there, he's just going to die, and he's not really going to add that much health because Grand Hammers only have 9 wounds per squad. They're going to die anyway. Like, trying to protect them is a waste of time. So why would you pair these things together? Well, it's because you want to create a forward castle. Because if you've noticed the other lists, they're all castle deployments, and Gardas in a castle is a great fit. But the problem with Gardas is that he's not so good at protecting Longstrike Raptors. In particular, adding 50% more wounds to those units isn't very good. However, adding 50% more wounds to a big block of 15 Judicators is fantastic. If you guys have tried to kill a squad of 15 bow snakes from Daughters of Cain that have the 6-up rerollable ward, you'll know what a pain in the butt it is to deal 30 wounds against a 6-up rerollable ward. 5+ ward is even better than that, and you also get an all-out defense and get the Judicators to a 3+. So that's pretty much the concept here that you're going for. Is you've got your Grand Hammers dropping in wherever you need it, and you drop everything else into play, or move or translocate everything forwards and create a middle of the board kind of castle that you all of your operations come out of. So this is a lot riskier than the other Grand Hammer styles that we've talked about, which are able to just play 30 inches back with long strikes and just blast everything off the table. This doesn't have long strikes. It doesn't have Thunderbolt Volley because it can't afford to bring those things. But what it does have is a 5-up board on your entire castle, which is great with chariots. It's great with vanquishers. Being Hallowed Knights, vanquishers can fight on death, get revived with Call for Aid, do it all over again. So this is a really awesome variant of that list. We kind of didn't put the pieces together for how crossbows and Grand Hammers would work together until a cool dude on our Discord named Kibetsin put the final piece together of, well, what if we brought Gardas? That's kind of the last piece of the puzzle. So all 3 of these things, normally these combinations wouldn't work well together, but in this specific combination, I think this is great. This is a very strong list. The damage output from 15 Judicators is tremendous.
Having played this list myself, my favorite thing to do is deploy that forward castle on cover. And then those Judicators are on a 3-up, and then you can all-out defense to ignore another rend. This list wants to be brawly. And if you can deploy up and on cover and get that castle on there going, you're just multiplying your wounds. Higher save is a bit more effective wounds. The Annihilators, you can... it opens up an interesting possibility where you can recover Annihilators when they don't make their charge. So this gives you the idea that maybe sometimes I don't... Normally I'm trying to put my Annihilators and Annihiliana in places where it's going to be awkward for my opponent to follow up if I don't make the charge. In this list, I actually consider keeping them closer to my castle to maybe recover them from there. If they want to come in and come towards my spikier castle, it can cost them. So it's neat. It opens up a little more ideas. It's a very different style than Annihiliana. It's much brawlier, and I think that's what makes it really cool.
I mean, it's a conservative castle play versus extremely forward castle deployment. Like, you're almost daring them to come to you and try to break into you, versus opposed to telling them, "Hey, you're slow," and yelling at them from a distance.
Yeah.
I think this is also a lot more fun for people to play against than 30-inch castles. Those are really tedious and boring, and I think you just get tired of playing them after a while too. So if you still like playing castle defensively, maybe try this. Maybe you'll have more fun, and maybe your opponents will have more fun too. Yeah.
That's one of the things I always note as a strength of Annihiliana is non-interactivity, which, well, by definition, isn't as fun. But it's a cool list. I love this style.
I mean, Annihiliana gets oppressive on larger maps. Like, if you have a ton of space between you and your opponent, oh my god, they will hate you.
Yep. If they didn't bring anything that can teleport charge reliably, they're going to have a miserable time against long strikes. Unfortunately, we were not able to get a photo of this archetype in time for this video, but talking about deployment here, what you want to do is you want your Lord Relictor to translocate key units up the board. If you look at which units you want to keep on the table and which ones you want on the board, obviously your Grand Hammers have to go in reserve. That's 2 units in reserve already. Your Chariot can just run up to meet your castle. Your Judicators can drop in. You want your screens to drop in, so that's already 3 units that you want to put in reserve there, on top of the 2 from Grand Hammers, which means everything else pretty much has to go on the table. So that's kind of a struggle for this list, is figuring out which units you want on the table and which ones you don't. I think one thing we could do to alleviate that is cut the Geminids from this list. Although I really do like them, especially against Night Haunt. I think cutting them for Aether Wings might help. Just having another body on the table to put more stuff in reserve could be very useful. So just keep that in mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, the way I usually deploy it is I have the Relictor, the Imperatant, and the Judicators with crossbows, as well as one unit of Liberators already on the field. So I have 4 down, and then in reserve I can put Gardas, I can put the Annihilators, and I can put the Vanquishers for that flex unit, that flex possible drop that we've talked about before. And so that way I've got 4 down and 4 in the sky, and I'm usually translocating the Adjudicators to get into the right position there for my forward castle that I'm going to build.
Mm-hmm. Now that does open you up to taking a lot of damage on that first turn with your Judicators. So, but if you're translocating them, just put them as far back as possible, right? Just put them out of range of anything that could possibly hurt them. Translocate them up on your turn, and then drop everything into play around them. It feels like warping in an army in StarCraft 2 when you're playing Protoss. It's like this is what it feels like. Your pylon goes down as your Judicators, and then everything else just warps in around them.
See, I would swip it. I would put the 15 Judicators in reserve and put the 5-man Redeemers on the table, so that if you go to translocate the Redeemer screen into position where you're going to drop your crossbows, and because you're not taking High Priest anymore, you fail the translocate, then you now know that you're not going to have that screen. So you can then start like moving the chariot up and dancing around to figure out where you're going to put your big spiky castle at.
Yeah, I just like the only reason I put the Vanquishers in Sky is to have an alternate drop, which can be really good into some armies like Night Haunt and IDK. Is sometimes you don't want to commit those Annihilators from the very beginning. You might need to get rid of something like some Thralls or some Chain Rafts that are in the way, and you want to get all that stuff out.
Yep, and that's why I recommended earlier bringing in some Aether Wings instead allows you to have another unit in Scions, which can make all the difference for a lot of matchups. Yeah. So keep an eye on that one. Next up is the Krondcast, which is already going 4-1 and 5-0 at certain events. This archetype, we obviously didn't invent it. It's something everybody's going to talk about, but that's the name we're going to give it first up because you're casting a lot of spells with Krondus, and also the Stormcast, Krondcast kind of pun, so it works on multiple levels. The core of the list is Krondus. He has risen up tremendously in this new metagame. Just ignoring the Endless Spell update, when people are running big units, his tail gets a lot more damage value. And when people are running hordes of units that have 2 attacks apiece, and you reduce them to 1 attack apiece with Krondus, it feels so good. It's so hard to kill Krondus with horde units. It's ridiculous. In the previous meta where people were spamming Gargans and Stormdrakes, Krondus was no good, but now he is excellent. And then you add the updated Endless Spells on top of that, and then you add Bounty Hunters on top of that with the units that combo with those Endless Spells, and it's great. So let me run through the main combo here. Krondus, +3 to cast. He's got a fantastic War Scroll spell that has all kinds of different possible things, but the one we want to focus on is the one that reduces enemy save rolls by 1. And that casts on a 9, so 6 on the dice because he's got +3. You give him cogs to reroll that, and that's great. And then you also combo that with the Purple Sun that gives a unit -1 to save rolls while it's in range. So you translocate Krondus forward, you cast these spells while you're in range of the cogs, and you blow stuff up with Judicators, with Tempesters, with Evocators, with Vanquishers. All these units that have typically low rend that can't deal with save stacking enemies just deal tremendous damage when you give an enemy -2 to save roll. So that lets you kill elite enemies. Krondus kills hordes, and you just deal fantastic damage all around. That's the core of the list. I think we've actually iterated on it since making this particular version of it. We've put out versions of this list that run a 4-block of Tempesters. It feels really good to do that instead of running more Evocators. And we'll keep iterating on it because it's a fantastic archetype.
Yeah, it's cool. I enjoy running this list a lot. And Krondus actually does a lot of work in the Night Haunt. It's amazing. Like, yes, they get to ignore half of what you put out pretty much with their 4-up save. But it's 2 damage each, so you end up just taking out as much of the unit as you can. The math adds up really nicely into Night Haunt, and that's a really kind of a big bad that's sneaking around. As the lists get more refined, I think we're going to see more Night Haunt at the top.
Yeah, and Krondus is really tanky. You can always Thundershock with him. He's got a huge base, so you can hit most of the, if not the whole enemy army, and then give him -1 to wound if you get lucky on the 3-ups. You can give him Finest Hour, All Out Defense, and Mystic Shield. All of those are fairly reliable. And then he's a really beefy 18 wounds. You can really leverage that defense. And that -1 attack thing, I can't stress how good it is to cut all of these units, like Bladegeist Revenants, 2 attacks apiece, go down to 1 attack. Hearthguard Berserkers go down to 1 attack. Witch Elves go down to 1 or 2 attacks, depending on their loadout. These units get neutered by this ability, and it's so strong. And then you add save stacking on top of it, and then Thundershock, and it just, yeah.
And he can roar. He's a monster.
That's right. Yep. So he's great. You got to leverage that defense with this list, though, because one thing this list doesn't have is bodies. It is really, when you spend 750 points on a big monster and spells, you don't end up with a lot of other stuff on the table. So everything else has to be very efficient. It has to be very purposeful. It has to really get its points back. So with that in mind, we think Lord Relictor definitely makes the cut, because you can give him an Arcane Tome, Master Magic, Translocation, kind of makes the whole combo work. He can cast Cogs, and then Krondcast can reroll spells, and then you translocate him up. And then
Purple Sun. Yeah.
Purple Sun, yep, get that whole combo rolling. Battle Mage is a good pick here. First off, because you want to fill a Warlord battalion, and a 100-point Battle Mage is really good for that. He combos with the Cogs. He gives you the option to Wild Form Krondcast and try to get some Translocate charges going on with +2. That means you're looking for a 7-inch rerollable charge, which is pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. Battle Mage also works well for Steadfast March. For example, if you don't want to translocate forwards, you're willing to just give up the whatever mortal wound or D3 mortal wounds that you're going to do with shooting on Krondcast, and then you just charge that into range. From there, you can round out the list in all kinds of directions. I mentioned we have versions of this list that have a 4 block of Tempesters. That's really good. Vanquishers are a good pick in this, because you can get them up to Rend 3 potentially, and Rend 3 Vanquishers are just disgusting against certain units. Tempesters are great. Judicators are great. I really like Evocators as well, not just because they're wizards, so they can get use of the Cogs, but they can also buff the Vanquishers in this list with +1 to wound. So you can have the Lord Relictor use Celestial Blades on Krondcast, and then also have your Vanquishers get buffed up as well. So there's all kinds of different routes to go with this archetype, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it going, especially if they nerf some of the most annoying stuff in the meta. I think this one will rise pretty high.
Yeah, this one doesn't do well in this fly spam, unfortunately.
Can't have it all, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a good. Fly spam is busted. Also, Kron is really not to be 600. Come on.
Yeah.
I would love it if you had like another 100 points in this list, just to bring some Liberators. That's all I want. Just a squad of those.
All right, next up, we have the longest strike list. And this is, like the name suggests, everything is supposed to reach out really far and hit you, and that is either through range or speed. So for this purpose, we're taking Signs of the Storm and Tempest Lords. And in this list, where the core of this list revolves around a Knight Judicator, Vanguard Raptors, Stormdrake Guard, Prosecutors, and essentially the hope of this list is to use the Vanguard Raptors in your typical castle formation protected by Liberators, or screened by Liberators, and use everything else to just shoot the crap out of your opponent, and then use the Battle Mage combo with the Lord Relictor's Translocation to basically catapult anything you want into the opponent's face, and then hit key targets or key areas of their army with it. Prosecutors are really good in this list, because in Bounty Hunters with the paired hammers, their damage output is actually really, really good. And since they come out of Scions with a 3d6 charge, it's already really reliable for them to get a 9 charge, and they don't really need the wild form support in order to do it. The thing that this list lacks is Aether Wings to make the Thunderbolt Volley a little bit more reliable, but with the Knight Judicator, I think, sort of evening out the damage on that front, I think you'll be fine. Going with the theme of the list, it also goes for a Horrorghast, which ideally, like the same reason as the Annihiliana Grande list, it just reaches out really far and touches like your opponent's units 32 inches away. So with all the shooting that you're doing, you should be able to cause some battle shock casualties via that route. And the other holy command we're going for is Steadfast March, is because after the Stormdrake Guard have been translocated, or maybe you just want to run them up and translocate something else to get out of harm's way, it really helps get you good movement. We typically go for Prosecutors in the Expert Conquerors Battalion. So we're not going for all the prosecutors and the bounty hunters. The reason we're doing that is because in this new meta with Galatian veterans and proving grounds being so important, prosecutors that can come out of 3d6 charge and just like take an objective away from something, or just land in a corner and then maybe like against the board hero that's holding a back objective and then use their 3d6 to get into range of the objective and take the objective away from that hero or monster. That's actually really, really sweet. Liberators are an expert conquerors for the same reason. Just being able to move Galatian veterans around an OPSEC is pretty strong. And yeah, I guess we did put Vanguard Rappers and Longstrike for the meme in Bounty Hunters, even though
It
we don't
could
have
come up. So one of the things you didn't mention, Ragonk, is the pick of Tempest Lords here. Because Stormdrake Guard can just already reroll charge as it is. They don't need that ability. But it's a 4-block of Stormdrake Guard, so they're going to be durable. They're going to be living more than one turn, so they're going to need multiple turns of reroll to charges, so it makes you a little more efficient there. But the main reason to go Tempest Lords is because it makes your prosecutors battle line. And when they're battle line, they gain veteran, and that's what allows them to play Proving Grounds and go into the Conqueror's Battalion. Because to be an expert Conqueror, you have to be a battle line unit.
Mm-hmm.
How did we land on the interaction of Tempest Lords re-rolling 1 die and the re-rolling the entire charge roll?
We have a very handy chart pinned in our Math Hammer channel on Discord. And if I am savvy enough, I will edit it into this video right now.
Is it like, can you use them both?
Well, because technically,
No.
core rules say you can't. You can't reroll something more than once.
Yeah. So the argument there is rolling 1 dice the same as re-rolling a dice roll, because the dice roll is 2d6, re-rolling one of the dice. But it's really pedantic, and I don't want to argue about things, so I just assume you get one or the other. You don't get both. But we do have, like I said, we have a handy dandy chart that'll show you, depending on what your 2 dice were rolling, it'll tell you what you should re-roll, either 1 dice or 2 dice, to get the highest percent.
That's what I was getting to.
Right.
Awesome.
So here, Jack, you took a picture. This is in your basement here. This is awesome.
No, this is actually it's in my man cave that is also my garage. And one of the things that I looked at with the way that the terrain is set up is that you can see that there are 2 very clear sort of firing lines from a traditional 11-inch deployment zone. I did miss that the Knight Judicator had the Arcane Tome, because I always put the Arcane Tome on my Relictor. And the idea was that you start the deployment on what is the left side of the picture until your opponent deploys behind cover, and then you drop the other set of long strikes and the Knight Judicator where they can see them and set up a crossfire in that center zone. I really like that interplay. I like the fact that the Knight Judicator comes with his own screen. And as a general rule, getting dragons on a 7-inch rerolling charge is utterly fantastic. So, yeah, I like this list. I was disappointed that I didn't have my Knight Judicator painted to put it on here, but, it is what it is.
The Knight Judicator is a really interesting pick. One of the things we talked about in our review of the General's Handbook was there's a battle tactic that requires a general slaying an enemy unit with attacks specifically. It can't be abilities. And one of the few generals in our book that's actually pretty good for that sort of thing would be something like a Knight Judicator. So you can soften it up with a Lightning Blast and then try to do his 6 damage in the shooting phase. So it won't work ever with Gaze of Sigmar, but if his 6 damage can get you a battle tactic, it's going to be on 2s and 2s. It's pretty reliable, so it's not the worst pick in the world. Just kind of wanted to showcase that with this list. And to your point about deploying until your opponent does something and then you pivot and go to the other side, that's one of the main advantages of having higher drops is you get the perfect deployment. We haven't done this video on deployment yet, but it's a really important thing to just, the perfect deployment can win you the game, and or at least make you not instantly lose. It's really hard to learn how to deploy, and it's a very complicated thing. But that's one aspect of it that you're talking about there, is you deploy until your opponent does something, and then you pivot. And now that you can put your long strikes in sight, out of range of certain things, yeah, that can just win you the game by deploying properly. So keeping on the so what I'm looking for here. The trend, keeping on the trend of Tempest Lords, we have the Nitro boost list. So we talked about this in the Stormkeep Lords of the Storm video we did a few months back at this point. Wow. But this is something that only the Stormkeep can do. It's a really cool thing where you can bring a Battle Mage as a coalition unit rather than as an ally, and then you can bring a Krondspine, because when you have a Krondspine in your list, it says you can't have any allies, but it doesn't say you can't have coalition units. So as a Stormkeep list, you can bring a Battle Mage and a Krondspine, cast the Battle Mages, +2 run, +2 charge, use the Krondspine's ability to reroll run and charge, and combo that with Steadfast March on a unit of, for example, 4 Fulminators, and they just go flying across the board. That's crazy mobility that your opponent is not going to expect. Once people get used to playing against Fulminators, they realize the 10-inch range is like a huge liability. Not this list. Not with this list. The 10 inches very quickly becomes like 18 inches, followed by a +2 rerollable charge very easily. So that's the core of the list. To complement that strategy, we go with a Lord Arcanum on Griff Charge, because he can just teleport himself forwards, and that way he's always in range of the Krondspine. He can issue all-out attack to it, and then it spreads to your units of Fulminators and Prosecutors. He also has Celestial Blades to buff up the Fulminators, and he gets +1 and Master Magic, which makes him a good wizard for casting things like the Quicksilver Swords or the Horrorghast. So you can use the Lord Relictor to translocate the Lord Arcanum forwards, cast those spells that are normally, Quicksilver Swords is normally a pretty short range spell, with the translocate and then a reliable +1 rerollable cast that your enemy is -1 to unbind. You can actually get that spell off pretty reliably and deal some extra mortal wounds. Rounding out this list are 2 units of Prosecutors with Hammers in the Bounty Hunters Battalion. They get extra damage on those attacks, which is really cool. That makes them actually a surprisingly decent, efficient, damaging unit against veterans. They're also battle line, which means they are going to contest Proving Grounds because they're veterans. And then in the Expert Conquerors Battalion, we have 2 units of Judicators that can drop into play. They also contest Proving Grounds. For Holy Commands, we go Steadfast March, obviously, and Thunderbolt Volley. With a unit of 5 Judicators, you can translocate them forwards and still receive Thunderbolt Volley command from another hero that you've translocated up, or just run forwards. Not 100% sold on Thunderbolt Volley, but I don't know what else to take with this list. Maybe go Battle Regiment in order to reduce the drops and force your opponent to go first. That could be an option, for sure.
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, you have 2 big damage units that you get to buff up and play around. The Prosecutors are much faster than Liberators for sure to get to Proving Grounds. Make sure that you are covering that game properly. You've got the Judicators, Thunderbolt Volley, get screens out of the way. It's still got all the tools that you need, but with a really cool combo with Nitro Boost here. That's pretty cool. I just wish the Judicators not having the ability to drop in is a little annoying, but you still got the Relictor to translocate for sure.
Yeah, I've considered going a squad of 10 on them instead, and then putting one of the Prosecutor units in Expert Conquerors instead. You lose the Thunderbolt Volley, but you could just take a different Holy Command. Not sure what you would take. Maybe a different enhancement, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So Fulminators do a ton of damage, and their only weakness is their mobility. This list fixes their mobility. So if you love Fulminators and you want to get the most out of them, give this, and you happen to buy the Krondspine. Let's be real, the intersection of people who want to try this list and also own a Krondspine is not a lot. But if you happen to have all these pieces, give it a try.
Honestly, man, I don't understand why people haven't just scratch built their own, because you can build a Krondspine for like $10.
I think most people have some kind of 3D printed proxy rather than buying that promo box.
That Creature Caster one across tournaments that aren't enforcing GW's model only policy, which is I guess is a good thing, because I guess for GW opens we probably won't see that many Krondspines, but yeah, it's just a great monster right now.
Once they release it separately, I'll get one.
No, they're likely to nerf it now
before they release.
Hey, good news! Here's a new battle scroll, and we're gonna nerf the Krondspine because everybody hates it. And also, here's the Krondspine released separately on its own. Now, no, they'll do it the other way. They'll release it separately. Then 2 weeks later, the battle scroll will come out.
Yep, you said it.
Next up is Oops All Dragons. So this is You can't. It's not all dragons technically, but we think any list that uses 6 or more dragons can fall into this category, because if you're just gonna run all Stormdrake Guard, that's not even an archetype. That's like you saw a War Scroll you like, and you just brought as many of it as you could, and there you go. That's your list. So you don't need advice from us. You clearly know what you're doing. But if you want to activate some more neurons, any list with 6 or more dragons we think falls into this archetype, and I think lists just get better when you round it out a bit more. So with this one, we decided leverage their defense. Their heavy defense on the Stormdrake Guard is excellent, and you can make it a lot better with a Lord Castellan giving them giving them Mystic Shield for another +1, with a reroll on Master Magic, and then also his Lantern is another +1, and then they can all out defense. So you can have 2+ Drakes ignoring Ren 2, and then you drop Gardas next to them, and they also have a 5+ ward, and they ignore spells on a 4+, and they're super fast with a Battle Mage giving them +2 to run charge with Steadfast March. Pretty dang fast. And then you drop in Judicators behind it. Yep, that's pretty much the list. It's like a death ball that moves forward and tries to pin and win, like a lot of other armies are trying to do. It's got some fun tech in here. The Purple Sun is an interesting piece. Kind of not short range, but not long range either. But if you're not playing defensively, you want to go more offense, you can try to cast the Purple Sun with a reroll on Master Magic. And then it's got that 5-man squad of Vanquishers and Hallowed Knights that we love to use. Call for Aid, bringing them back is excellent.
Yeah, I like running Oops lists a lot. This list is a great place to start. There's a lot of variation you can do on this. You can really move everything around. You can make it into a 3-drop, since 3-drop seems to be like the new 1-drop lately. There's a lot of variation to be done with that. The Stormdrake Guard getting those bonuses, it's flexible to the situation. Sometimes you give Mystic Shield to the 2 block, and then you give the Lantern to the 4 block. It's the guaranteed thing. You spread that out as you need it. Or you can focus everything on the 4 block and have the 2 block be more of a mobile unit. Sometimes I find myself, when I was running this kind of 6 Drake style, putting the 2 block into Scions and being able to put that somewhere else, have my opponent move first, and then be able to put that unit down somewhere where they really don't want it to be. So there's just a lot of variation with the list. The dragons just deal enough damage. It's a lot about dealing enough damage and just not taking any damage in return, which the dragons do really well with this combo.
Now, what weapon would you run on the Drakes? And let's say this exact list. Would you run the Lancers or the Swords?
So this list, because we have the Bounty Hunter Battalion, I am running the Swords for the 2 damage. So even though the Lances do, if you do the math, the Lances do just about 1 wound more in most cases. Pretty much everything down to a 2-up, it's about 1 wound more, and it actually loses out as you get above a 4-up. And so that's only on the charge. This list, you're going to get stuck a little more often than not, especially with the 4 block, and the focus on being more defensive. So the Swords end up winning out in most games for sure, especially in a Night Haunt.
Yeah.
Okay. My deployment here, I have the dragons deployed, assuming I'm going first. A lot of times I'm running this as a 3-drop, so I'm trying to force my opponent to go second from me. Going for a 3-drop is pretty cool because you can go ahead and deploy the further back units. The way I usually do that is have obviously the dragons are in Bounty Hunter, so I deploy my Battle Regiment first, and then another unit that's in Hunters. And then I can really put the dragons forward, and hopefully my opponent isn't deploying too far back. In a lot of these 18-inch away, a lot of the battle plans are 18 inches away, so the dragons can easily get a steadfast march, or even just moving up and rolling a good charge to get to their objective is just really good. It's a pin and win, like we talked about. And the only real tech behind this is the Castellan and the Battle Mage are just out of unbind range from anything that isn't in the very front line. If you were to take a measurement there, you'd see that they're actually about 28 inches away from the front line with that 18-inch deployment. So it's really just, basic stuff. Deploy out of unbind range, give your buffs, have the dragons move forward, pin and win.
And obviously Gardas here, not on the table. But if you're facing against an Alpha Strike list, for example, if your opponent puts a bunch of Mawcrochers and stuff down, or something that wants to kill drakes like a Kronspine, you would certainly consider putting Gardas on the table.
Oh yeah, facing those KO lists, definitely just going to have Gardas up front, since I'm worried about weathering that first storm and then getting out to them.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, because of your convenient woods placement there in your territory, you can just drop Gardas in woods, and not only can he not be shot by KO because there's more than 3 inches of woods there, anything that could shoot him, you'll have +1 save. Good stuff. Next up is the Great Hunt. I believe this is the final Stormcast archetype that we have. We have a few more lists after this. But the Great Hunt is near and dear to my heart because it relies on MSU shooting, which means multiple small unit shooting, all of it buffed together by a Lord Arcanum on Toralon. The Toralon has a really cool effect that after he moves, all units within 3 inches of him get a +1 hit buff that lasts until the start of your next movement phase. So they can go off and do their own thing and be completely independent. One of the reasons we typically don't do something like this as Stormcast is you can only use all-out attack on 1 unit at a time. So if you ran, let's say, 5 units of 5 crossbows, only one of those units is getting all-out attack. So it's really inefficient to be hitting on 2s and 3s with 1 unit and 3s and 3s with everything else. Ideally, you want everything as accurate as possible as Stormcast. But the Toralon gets around that problem because everything can have +1 hit. So this list uses a Toralon as the general with Celestial Blades and Scintillating Trail. It uses 2 Knight Judicators, one of which is going to pick an Arcane Tome just so it can do an additional D3 mortal wounds with Lightning Blast every turn. It's got 3 Vanguard Raptors with Hallowstrikes. It's got 10 Boltstorm Judicators that can just drop in and all out attack themselves. It's got 2 Fulminators, 2 Tempesters, and 5 Vanquishers, and then a couple spells. So it seems pretty lean, but you also have to consider that you're getting 2 units of Gryph-hounds, 1 for each of those Knight Judicators. And those are independent units that can go off and contest objectives and then just screen and die. They're also really, really good against stopping enemy reserve deployments. If anything tries ambushing you, then your dogs bark and then it just goes away. Something happens, a bunch of arrows fly in a certain direction and then your problem goes away. But this I think is seeing a lot of renewed attention in the newest season because previously one of the weaknesses of this list was dealing with hordes because Knight Judicators deal 6 damage a turn pretty reliably, but it's max 6 damage per turn for 205 points. That's even worse damage output than Vanguard Raptors, which we don't consider very good at killing hordes. This problem is solved 2 ways in this season. First off, you have the Horror Ghast, which is really, really good against horde units. You can pump in 20 damage and then wipe out a 30 block of ghosts pretty reliably. But also, Bounty Hunters on units like Tempester is excellent. Tempesters are a fantastic shooting unit that gets even better when they can dive into melee and deal 3 damage apiece with their mounts or 2 damage apiece with their swords. They become a very, very efficient anti-horde unit. This list had no problem taking down Gargants. It had no problem taking down Mawcrochers, big elite things. Like, if that wound characteristic is under 100 on a list, the Great Hunt could shoot it off the table in like 2 or 3 turns. But anything higher than that wound characteristic, and it really struggled. But this season fixes all of those problems. So this is a really fun archetype to play.
Yeah, I'm pretty hype on it. One thing to note about the Gryph-hounds and them barking, you can pick the same unit to shoot something twice. Because of the way it is worded, it is any 3 units. So those Raptors can shoot, and then the same unit can shoot again. And then you can have like the Judicators or the Knight Judicators go ahead and shoot that unit. Just something to note if you're using Gryph-hounds ever, usually with the Knight Judicator.
One thing to note is probably that isn't there something in the core rules that says your unit can't shoot more than twice a phase?
Yeah, more than twice. That's why I mentioned it's just twice.
You have to choose 2, so just be careful.
Yeah. So the Raptors shoot twice, and then you'd have to pick the Judicators or Knight Judicator.
So after putting out this list, I actually went back and tried to make another version closer to the original version of this list, which had 4 Knight Judicators. And I found that by sticking 4 Tempesters in a single squad, dropping the Fulminators, and then bringing in some Prosecutors to add some speed, I think this could actually be competitively viable because the Knight Judicators kill anything with a good armor save. The 4 Gaze of Sigmar are really good against Ideneth or castle deployments in general. Like if Dauntless Hunters, for example, or Annihiliana Grande faced up against this list, it's a really tough matchup because you would deploy your Grand Hammers and they just die instantly.
Yeah, you have to find a way to get rid of 4, 6, 8 Gryph-hounds.
Yeah, 8 Gryph-hounds. Let me show you guys a picture of the insanity that happens here. Like the only place you'd be able to deploy is up front. That's it. That's the only viable option. And this is also keeping units of Judicators off the table and Prosecutors off the table. If I wanted to really completely deny your Deep Strike, I could slide some of these Judicators forwards and put those screens on the sides. And then no matter where you deploy, I get to shoot you 3 times. It's pretty rough.
Fun times.
But you can see with this deployment, everything's in range to get +1 hit from the Toralon. This is a very compact list, like Hallowstrike. It's even slower than Hallowstrike. That's why I added the Prosecutors in here to give it a bit more speed. The Tempestors are a 10-inch move, but 10 inch does not go very far, man. And it's not the Knight Judicators are this like long range anti-elite, and then everything else is like close range anti-horde. And it kind of just covers all bases in terms of damage profiles. Like there's nothing this can't kill. I think it just comes down to execution and conservation of bodies, because there's not a lot of bodies going on. There's a lot of units, but not a lot of bodies. So every loss matters, and knowing the right time, making sure you have a command point saved for call for aid is really important. Knowing the right time to drop your Prosecutors in is important. Knowing when to commit your Tempestors to melee is going to be important. Yeah, I think this is honestly, I think this might be my favorite list out of all the ones we've talked about so far. And note, I am using Vigilors on 90 mil bases because I didn't want to have 4 of the exact same model in my army. I just don't like that. So, yeah. So this is not. That concludes the archetype section of our video today. We just also had a couple extra lists we wanted to talk about today. These are ones we've been cooking up behind the scenes, just exploring different combos, testing them out. And start us off, Dan, with your Dueling Dragons.
Yeah, this is the current tournament list I've been testing the past couple weeks, and taking that oops concept from earlier and just kind of trying to really make it as lean as possible. So I'm like, okay, I've got 2 Stormdrake Guard units. Do I really need the second one to be a Stormdrake Guard unit when I have a very similar pointed, almost unkillable thing that I can put in that slot? And it actually synergizes really well. It's fun to not run a Relictor. That's what I've been finding with this one. You'll notice I have a Lord Castellan with a Master Magic Arcane Tome and Celestial Blades. So again, the option I had earlier where now I'm able to focus my buffs by limiting myself onto the Stormdrake Guard solely. So I'm using, in some matchups, like against Night Haunt, I'm probably going Mystic Shield, and then obviously the Lantern for a +2 there. They don't usually have monsters, so they can't roar me, so I'll usually be at a +3. And so I have taken, multiple unit charges and knocked off a -3 to save because I was +3 to save. And it just focuses all of that. And then the Krondspine is able to act pretty independently of everything. And it just synergizes really well. I'm able to deploy similarly to how the Uppsala Dragons deployment was. Because what I can do is have the Krondspine let me re-roll Steadfast March runs, and be able to, cross more of the board. It just opens up more options. The Krondspine itself moves 12, so it's very, it's just as quick as the other dragons are. And it can go and do everything it needs to do. It's a solid anchor piece. If you're going to get alpha and you just stick the Krondspine at the very front of your army, and you go, great, you really want to get stuck on that? Go for it. I've got the Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows, just getting in there. I'm not running Thunderbolt Volley because I am going for Battle Regiment, so they're put together. It's a 3-drop. I'm trying to control the tempo. All in all, this list is a lot of fun. It's gotten me, 4-1, 3-0 so far, and a 2-1. So it's been a good time. I'm enjoying running this list a lot. I really wish I could run Call for Aid since I'm a little light there, but having the 2 units of Liberators has been pretty good, being able to drop them in and take objectives for Proving Grounds. I'm really enjoying this list a lot.
I wish we could just take more units of Liberators in every list. Like, they're S tier for a unit. Like, just having cheap disposable bodies is so good.
We only usually just have it for 1 round, and that's where we start to.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, turns out, Krondspines are really good into dragons, so the best counter to a Krondspine is just to stick it onto another Krondspine. That's kind of where I went with this list, and like I said, it's performed really well for me competitively.
Sweet, dude. How often do you think the fighting on death matters for Liberators and Bounty Hunters? Would you go paired weapons?
I was what you call it? Now that I noticed that I could go paired weapons, because I'll be honest, I forgot that was a loadout. Like it just is. I would in fact go paired weapons for sure, 100%. Because it's just you expect them to die anyway. That +1 to save isn't doing the most, which is another reason why Vanquishers are so good right now. And I wish I had the points for Vanquishers. It's just so lean right now.
Man, if we had 5-point drops on our heroes across the board, it would open up a lot of options. That's cool, man. Yeah, keep writing those great battle reports. It's been a lot of fun reading them with this list in particular. So keep at it, man. This is a good one.
Yeah, this is a good one to teach you. Playing without a Relictor, very different. My one loss at that GT was from just not being used to playing without a Relictor. I'll be honest. That was pretty much 90% of that.
You got to rip the Band-Aid off. You just got to do it. You got to learn how to play without one.
Those hex rays moving 30 inches. So far.
Yep. It makes you approach the game differently. Like that's our allegiance ability is translocation.
Yeah.
All right, Jack, run us through your list here, buddy, because you hate traditional shooting.
Well, I don't hate it. I absolutely don't hate it. I think that it's great. But I had the opposite reaction to the Thunderbolt volley nerf. So instead of taking more long strikes, I instead decided that our dedicated shooting units were now not worth their points from my perspective. And I wanted to see if I could make a functional list that had none of our traditional shooting units. In addition, as most people on our Discord is aware, I'm a huge fan of Dracothian Guard and Tempesters in particular. And so that just became the concept of the list. And what this does is it sets up to where you can use the Battle Mage to buff either the Fulminators or the Stormdrake Guard, depending on what your opponent puts available for that translocate charge, and then teleports out of your castle setup. The other unit moves into position, and the Tempesters drop in out of Scions, and you just have 3 points of pressure the turn that you want to engage your opponent. And it's worked very, very well. Currently, I've been using the Fulminators as a cruise missile, translocating them in and using them to delete things like the Eidolon, the Caster Eidolon, or the Maw Crusher, or anything that the opponent has left available. And if you can't, then you just don't, and you wait another turn. It's good. I am taking this to the next major GT that I am going to next week. I haven't had it at a GT yet, but I have played about 10 games against Daughters, 3 against Night Haunt, and so far I'm 9-1 with this.
That's an impressive record. I like that.
It's good stuff, man. I love the versatility. Like you talking about the versatility of the being able to use the Stormdrake Guard or the Fulminators as your first missile, or even just holding back and letting the opponent open up. I love options in lists, and I like that this list has those options. It's really good, man.
Yeah, absolutely. The other cheeky thing that I do with this is leave one of the units of Liberators in reserve and set the other one up as a disposable screen. And the moment my opponent kills it, I use Call for Aid, bring it back, and then translocate it into their territory. Just because it's just once they have close to get to me, I don't care anymore. And it's part of the reason why I stopped taking Defend What's Ours, because I was noticing that my opponent could just too easily get into my territory, and there was nothing I could do about it. So it's super, super fun.
Yeah, Defend What's Ours is really suited to longer range shooting. Even something like crossbow adjudicators, but when your longest range shooting is 12 inches, it's a lot tougher.
Yeah, I find myself taking no place for the week. My last the list I covered just now also had no place for the week, and I mean it kind of goes with what we're trying to do, which is of course take out those GVs that are letting them score tactics, or just take out whatever's important. Usually, if something is good enough to become battle line, like Hernos or like the turtle, something stuff like that that people take conditional battle line, enemy paladins for example, or Dracoths. It's stuff that we want to take out anyway. So I think No Place for the Week synergizes really well with a lot of these lists with a lot of damage. Really liking that so far.
Absolutely, because the damage output from the list was specifically designed to be able to target common units that you come up against. So a block of 60 zombies, a block of 30, a block of witch elves, a block of blade geist revenants, that kind of stuff.
Flies.
And flies, right? Exactly. And guaranteed you're going to take it off the table. And that's all I got for you.
Are there any swaps you'd want to make to this list?
I have been considering looking at like dropping the one thing that this list has been really struggling against is the stupid cast and can't be dispelled purple sun, because like trying to roll a 9-up with no rerolls is just a pain in the butt. So far I have yet to dispel the purple sun in any game I've played. So one of the things,
just Nighthaunt, and I think it's
So I've been looking at, because you've got KO, you've got Nighthaunt, OBR can do it. So it's one of those things where if that were the case, I think I would probably drop the Relitor, make the Castellan the general, and take a Rune Lord. And then maybe take Horrorghast or something. Have some more points to play with. It's or drop the Relitor down to an Incantor and take a Rune Lord or something. I don't know, something. It's the one thing I'm trying to work around, and I haven't found a solution yet.
Fair enough. Looking forward to seeing how it evolves over time.
So this is the Taming Ghur list, and this is mainly a thing because A, I like Astral Templars as a concept. B, I kind of want to make Vanguard Hunters and Vanguard Paladins. For those of you who don't know, I think we have a Dauntless Hunters list in our Discord. That is, I think, in my opinion, that is the slightly better list. But I actually did want to try and make Paladors work. Here it goes. The core of this list is to, obviously, because we're in Ghur and we want to take advantage of Ghur, to use Krondspine Incarnate as our main sort of distraction card effect / if you don't deal with it, it'll kill you. But the list also features a Loricon on Griff Charger with the Scintillating Trail, Master Magic, and Thundershock, DID, and a Geminids of Ulgish to pair with. And the idea being to use him and the crossbows in conjunction with Geminids to essentially just bolt down key targets. Use the Vanguard Hunters and Vanguard Paladors with their mobility to either move around the battlefield using their teleport or just regular move up, and the Bounty Hunters featuring Paladors and Fulminators to hit key targets that you're opponent. Vanguard Paladors actually do pretty respectable damage when you add in the Bounty Hunters damage for them, and we covered this, I think, in our last comparison. Other than that, we're just featuring some 3 units of Expert Conquerors because this doesn't put out a ton of damage, but it can use its mobility alongside Translocation to really just grab key objectives from your opponents that once you clear them, take them. This includes a Knight Incantor just to be able to deny key endless spells or spells your opponents could have that damage your somewhat fragile units. And then, Celestial Blaze for the Paladors or Fulminators as you. This list is fairly straightforward. It's just trying to make good use of the Krondspine and Astral Templars with everyone ignoring monster set, except for the Kron.
One of the issues I have with Vanguard Hunters is that they're not redeemers, so you can't revive them with Call for Aid, and it's like sometimes you want to screen on both sides.
Yep, you can see this list is 1970 points, and I would have taken Call for upgraded the other Liberator unit to Vanguard Hunter, but unfortunately, sorry, they're not redeemers, so I can't replenish them. The other switch I could see making is cut that unit of 5 Liberators and upgrade them to Vanquishers. Put that third unit in Bounty Hunters Battalion, and that could be a neat little play. But this list really isn't going for a Battle Mage, so outside of Steadfast March, it's not going to have a huge amount of mobility. You're essentially going to be absorbing some charges and then riposting, and hopefully the Krondspine helps you absorb them. Because if they're trying to charge your Adjudicators and not the Krondspine, if the Krondspine gets to in melee with them and gets to do what it does, then it's great.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's basically what this list is.
Man, I gotta tell you, I absolutely adore 4 inherent teleports a turn.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because
like
you're just everywhere. You're freaking everywhere.
Yeah. Anything in this list can basically translocate and move back.
Just remember weird. The really weird teleporting restrictions on Vanguard Paladors. They can't go into terrain, and they can't go within, I think, 1 or 3 inches of an objective, something like
1
that.
1 inch of an objective.
It's so silly. I don't know why they have that restriction.
I guess they didn't want you to be able to go into cover, like just teleport into cover. Maybe that's why.
Like every other teleport in the game can. No, this unit, it's overpowered.
Yeah,
faction. I gotta remember.
I have no idea. I mean, they were like, oh, Stormcast already has such good teleport. Why are we giving them another? They think of these things when they're writing our book. They don't think of that like that.
It's peculiar. This 86 wounds you have listed here. That doesn't include the effective 36 wounds minimum that the Krondspine has.
Yeah. No, I just went for what it says on the scroll part, not the level.
Okay.
Yeah, with plus 36, this is actually coming in with higher model, higher wounds than our typical lists are.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's I think this isn't a 5-0 list by any means, but I think like if you're trying to go easy on some people, it's fine. Like you could get some good reps.
Yeah.
And if you have a fascination for the Vanguard shape, play this.
Yeah, if you just want to use Paladors. Mm-hmm. You want a reason to play them. I wish the Aqualog was good. I really do.
It could be a points issue, honestly. What is he, like 2 something?
200.
He's more
200. Yeah, he could be like a Liege Cavalos, like 170, and then that would probably be.
If his ability to use a command worked on Vanguard Raptors, he might see play, even at 200. Because then he's like a Lord Imperator for hunters or for Raptors, which is like that's fine, right? That's not a bad niche.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find the Geminids here being so short range? Everything else without a relic. Oh no, sorry, you've got the Relictor, so you can.
Yeah, I've got the Relictor. So the idea is to translocate the Arcanum. Since I don't have the Thunderbolt Volley here because I have a reinforced unit of Adjudicators, I'm not trying to translocate them. I'll probably drop them in using.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to translocate the Lord Arcanum, cast Geminids in their face, pull them back.
Right. Cool. I like it. Astral Templars is it's so satisfying to pick it and feel good about it.
Yeah, it's good. I actually like that it's 1970 because you have a really good chance at the Triumph. And I gotta say, Adjudicators with crossbows with all attack and the Triumph.
You really need to delete them. Oh.
That hits so good against Night Haunt.
Yep, that's another reason that other unit is not a Vanquisher or a Vanguard. I was like, 1970, I feel pretty good getting.
Sweet. And our last list here, this is just a concept I was putting together. I called it the Big Bite because I noticed there was an interaction between Ravenak's Gnashing Jaws and the Shards of Valahar. So Shards of Valahar we rated really poorly, and I stand by that rating, frankly. But because it reduces enemy movement characteristic in the movement phase. Now, for that to survive to your opponent's turn, it has to get through a round of dispels. And because it's really easy to dispel, it's probably not going to do that. So that's not very useful, right? To half your enemy movement, but they'll just ignore it because they're going to dispel it anyway. That's not worth the points to force an enemy to dispel your endless spell. However, if their characteristic is halved, well, when the Ravenak's Gnashing Jaws go to take a bite, then they're going to get an even bigger bite because the shards actually activate as a predatory spell at the end of the hero phase. So you can activate them first and then activate your jaws so that the halved movement characteristic activates before the jaws take a big bite. So one of the problems with the jaws, there's 2 problems. One, random movement. And I hate random movement in this game more than anything else. So I was really ready to just completely discount them. But when you can translocate a Lord Arcanum forwards who can reliably cast the Jaws from 9 inches away on 3d6, like, yeah, okay, you're going to reach your target there, especially when you can re-roll the 3d6 to help eliminate super low rolls. And then the Lord Arcanum can just teleport back, so no problem there. So the goal here is you use your Slan Star Master in order to cast the shards from super far away. It's got like a about 30-inch threat range. It's a little bit less than that. You can pick up a whole bunch of units, tag them, give them half movement, and then your Lord Arcanum on Griffcharger is translocated forwards, cast the Jaws, and then the Jaws take a big bite. Now, as I was saying, one of the weaknesses of the Jaws, first up, is the random movement. The second one is sometimes you just face really fast units. Like, stuff has 12-inch, 14-inch move, 10-inch move. Like, these are really common in Age of Sigmar, and the Jaws are great against, like, 5-inch move support heroes. They're going to take a huge bite out of them. Or, like, a Tree Lord, right? 5-inch move or 6-inch on a Tree Lord, I think.
5-inch.
5-inch, yeah. And it's going to really do a lot of mortal wounds, and they it's hard to recover from that amount of damage. Well, Sylvaneth can because they're healing, but you know what I mean. It's a lot of mortal wounds. But then you face stuff like Chariots that are a 12-inch move, and you're like, oh, well, my Jaws aren't reliably doing anything at all. But when you half the Chariot down to 6, you can take a really big bite out of it. And that's why I called this the Big Bite. It's also got Vanguard Raptors to help finish off things with Thunderbolt Volley and their regular shooting. It's got typical Bounty Hunter loadouts with Stormdrake Guard being a fast mobile threat, Vanquishers being a very efficient Bounty Hunter unit, and Prosecutors being fast, also going Tempest Lords to make them battle line. And then in addition to that, it's got another screen of Liberators, another screen of Aetherwings. This is trying to win off shooting and magic almost exclusively. It's not going to do a lot of combat damage against like typical things. It's going to really struggle to deal with high armor targets, but that's where the Jaws hopefully come into play. And the Cogs makes everything a lot more reliable. So ideally, the Lord Relictor is going to cast the Cogs, and then that way the Slan and the Arcanum can reroll their spells. Well, I guess the Arcanum rerolls anyway. What do you guys think?
Pretty sweet. I like it. I think it's a little light on bodies. Actually, not. I wouldn't say light on bodies. A little light on melee hammers. But I guess this one is where it's trying to make magic. So I think it works, especially between the Slans doing his Comet, casting Jaws and slowing the enemy army down. You should have enough time to wear them down with the Raptors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Slan's casting at +1 all the time. He's got his Comet's Call, which is going to ping mortal wounds on everything you care about anyway. Combine that with the Vanguard Raptor shooting and the big Jaws bite, the Stormdrake Guard breath, and I think that's enough mortal wounds to get through a lot of save stacking. And then for Hordes, you've got Vanquishers, Guard, and Prosecutors. It's got a lot of bodies. It's got Vanquishers, Liberators, Aetherwings, and Prosecutors. So it's got 4 disposable units, 2 of which could be revived. One of them, those 2 could be revived. Yeah, I think it's pretty good against everything except like super high save stacking elite armies. Like facing another Stormcast list could be kind of rough with this, especially if they have a Knight Incantor to just cancel the combo. That's another problem with this list is like you're rerolling your spells, but you don't have any bonuses, so you're just going off the dice.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, the Slan is going to cast out of unbinding range almost every time, but the Arcanum on Griffcharger with his Jaws, that is susceptible to get unbound. Scintillating Trail helps. It is -1 to enemy unbinding rolls. This might be the kind of scenario where it's like, oh, I rolled a 6 to cast the Jaws, but you know what? I'm going to reroll to get it even higher because that's pretty easy to unbind.
Yeah, but Sylvaneth might give you some trouble, but since they do that, the reroll or 3d6 thing on like one spell or like once per hero phase, you can still get your other spells off pretty well. It's not a good.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't happen. There's still other stuff in the list. Like the whole list isn't relying on the Jaws. In that situation, it's kind of like a weaker Stormcast list, but that's not a bad thing. Like Stormcasts are still good, so it's not the end of the world. If you fail to cast, you just teleport back. There's no risk of the Lord Arcanum ever dying. It's great.
Have you given any thought to shuffling around a little bit to do Horrorghast and the Stormcast Comet and just like dropping mortal wound bombs on people and watching them run away and like just doing a crazy amount of damage in the hero phase? I've
definitely thought about that because unlike a lot of other armies, the Stormcast and the spells can be cast by allies. They're not locked to Stormcast wizards casting them. There's no racial keyword or faction keyword required for that. So a Slan can cast a Comet from 36 inches away, and then also do his Comet's Call. Like, I know the combo you're talking about, but I think that's just a different list at that point. I think you skip the Lord Arcanum on Griff Charger. I think you just go like, more wizards, and you just try to Mortal Wound Bomb them out of existence. And that's another list for another day. I really want to explore that concept for sure.
The big bomb.
Yeah. This is the
I
big
think
bite. It's the big bomb.
I honestly can tell you, Paul, that every time I've been to the gaming store where I've been playing a lot of the people testing out my list, there is a Slan on the shelf, and I have almost bought it every time I'm in the store. Just to do this, so I could like put my Stormcast comment in a list and use it.
It's good, man. Slan is a fantastic ally. Generating command points, he's got a great signature spell. If you have any amount of endless spells in your list, especially long range ones like the Shards or Horrorghast or Comet, he's fantastic for that, because like his spells are going to be Mystic Shield, Comet's Call, whatever endless spell you brought. Like he needs endless spells to cast, otherwise he's useless. He's also, +1 unbind across the table, like no line of sight, like no range requirements, unbinding anywhere on the table. Like he's pretty versatile. And if your opponent tries to shoot him down, like they'll probably kill him, but then you'll win the game because they wasted time and resources killing a big fat frog instead of doing anything useful. So he's vulnerable, in air quotes, but not really. Like, who's gonna waste their time killing the frog? He's going to be so far back that any attempt to kill him will be punished severely.
I think maybe one thing I'd look at on the list is looking at swapping out the Stormdrake Guard and using the Liberator points to maybe do some Dracoths, because that would get you to that 440, 60 mark to be able to do something like that. That would probably be one of the first things I'd look at here, since you've already got the Prosecutors. Stormdrake Guard are not battle line in Tempest Lords. Darn.
That
won't work.
Yeah,
that's why it won't work. Oh, that's all right. I was just
could go hammers.
Looking at the list, yeah.
But there's yeah. Could go hammers to Sigmar, swap the Stormdrake Guard for some kind of Dracothian, either Tempestors or Fulminators. That's possible. But then you lose the Proving Grounds on Prosecutors, which I really like.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have.
An 18-inch run move on a Proving Ground. That's one of the problems. I don't know about you guys, what I've been facing in Season 1 so far is like, oh, here's a Proving Ground, and none of my units can get to it, and it's the one I need in order to have more objectives than my opponent. I don't know if you face that a lot, but Prosecutors are perfect for that scenario. Because sometimes you just can't translocate onto it, but you can just run onto it.
Yeah. I'm playing my Dragon list. Having my Dragon list doesn't care about having the Liberators on the board at all. So like being able to save them in reserve is really funny actually. But I usually can't, because unfortunately the Krondcast doesn't count for Signs of the Storm. So something to note. It does have to be a Stormcast unit on the battlefield.
Okay, I think that wraps up this video, this episode of Lords of the Storm. Thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions or comments about any of the lists that we have shown you here, you can feel free to jump into our Discord. We have dedicated list channels for all of the archetypes that we showed off in here.
So we want to thank everybody for watching. As always, if you disagree with us, please feel free to go ahead and put something in the comments. If you think that there's a list idea that we might have missed, you can always put it in the comments or join our Discord. And please, we would appreciate it if you do all the YouTube algorithm stuff, like subscribe, turn on notifications, that kind of stuff. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah, see you guys.
See ya.
Bye.